Welcome to In Via, the podcast where we're navigating the pilgrimage of life. We are all in Via, on the way, and we are learning a lot as we go. I'm your host, Joan Watson. Join me as we listen to stories, discover travel tips, and learn more about our Catholic faith. Along the way, we'll see that if God seeks to meet us in Jerusalem, Rome, or Santiago, He also wants to encounter you right there in your car, on your run, or in the middle of your workday. Great. Well, it's funny to welcome you because I think we're both kind of co-hosts. I don't think you're necessarily a guest being the founder of Verso, but I'm here with John Paul, Lishon, and it's exciting. It's our first episode.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
So we're just actually going to chat today, but I think we should start by talking about what Verso is and why we're here talking about pilgrimage. And I think we have to start by kind of backing up and talking about who John Paul is.
Okay.
Is that okay? Put you on the spot?
Sure.
If you could tell people 3 sentences about yourself, short and sweet, who would you say John Paul Lishon is?
Oh my gosh.
You could have more than 3. I just always hate when people say, like, tell me about yourself, because then it's like, well, I was born in Lafayette, and so I don't want to give you, make you tell your entire life story.
It makes me want to give like very unique and
like things.
I've fashioned this for hours. I've like wordsmithed the perfect, because I only have 3 sentences.
Yes,
you only gave me
true.
3. So.
You're right. Well, if you've done that, you can give us 3 sentences, but I also allow you to have more.
Or it could be like a social media profile. I am a father and a son and a brother and anyways.
Yeah.
3 sentences about myself. So I think one of the most, where I would start is I like to blaze my own trail. And that sounds, okay. So we're here talking about like the beginnings of Verso.
Yeah.
And so that sounds maybe a little cliche, if you will. Cause like, you're an entrepreneur. Of course you like to blaze your own trail, but it's something that I actually didn't really think about too much. But then those times in your life you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, like that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So for instance, like when I was in high school, this is very embarrassing, but when I was in high school, I went to a Catholic school, so I had uniforms. Okay.
Yeah.
And I wore a pocket projector every day of school.
No, you did not.
And I would write messages on the front of it. I would take address labels and I'd write a message.
No, you were that kid?
Yes. I was that kid. So things like that.
Were you doing it purposely to you weren't really a nerd. You were like embracing I'm going to be very different. You're going to blaze your own trail.
I am a 16-year-old boy trying to probably get attention.
Yeah.
And this was like my way to get attention.
How'd you think of new things every day?
Oh, well, after a while, it was good about it at first. Yeah. And then it'd be like 2 days, I wouldn't change it. And then it'd be like a week. And then it'd be like 3 weeks, I wouldn't change the message.
So if I find somebody who went to school with you, is that what they would remember about you, do you think?
I would imagine a lot of them would remember.
That's hilarious.
Maybe not.
That is hilarious. That is hilarious.
The culmination, my favorite one of all time, was it was picture day, and I put "Hi, Mom."
That's amazing. I want to see this. I want to see it. We should put it in the podcast notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you blaze your own trail, like in lots of different ways. It's not just that you founded your own business, but that's your personality.
Yeah. I mean, the other big one was in college. I designed my own major.
Wow.
Yeah. Because apparently none of the other majors were good enough for me.
Do it yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but I mean, I never thought I'd own my own business. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur or as a business owner ever. And but when looking back, it was like it's always been something like I've always been somebody who's been really unique and willing to like just do their own thing. And
which is so important for an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
it's also really important in our line of work, right?
Yeah.
To have that kind of that adventure and that willingness to kind of step out of our comfort zones and lead others to do that, as we're going to talk about on the podcast about pilgrimage. But like even people who aren't willing to blaze their own trail, you help them blaze their own trail in a sense with Verso, which I think is really beautiful that you've kind of taken this characteristic and helped others do it as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's really neat.
So that's one sentence, that long answer for one sentence. what else? 3 sentences to describe John Paul. I think another one would be that something related to, I am a limited human being. I'm a sinner. I'm a limited human being, but I'm loved by God.
I love that.
That's something I don't think I care to admit very often, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah. I'm very much a person that likes to think they can just do it all themselves. And even like in prayer, I just kind of be like, hey, don't worry, God, I got this. Like, don't worry about me. Go worry about somebody else who needs you more. Right.
Oh my gosh.
And that's maybe not the best attitude to take. So that's maybe more of I can use a dose of humility every once in a while. Yeah. And I think the Lord shows me that quite often in my life.
It's the most dangerous thing to pray for. Never pray for humility, because then he humiliates you and you're like, no, because that's the only way you can get it is to be humiliated. So don't pray for it.
Okay.
Wow. These are really powerful sentences. I was not expecting this.
Well, they have to meet, they have to be worth something here. Wow. So, and then last one would be something about family, I think, obviously. So, I kind of joked about that. I'm a father, son, blah, blah, blah. But, so much of my life has been shaped by my family, my parents, my wife, my kids. Yeah. So it's so much of my own identity is wrapped into, the family I came from, the family that I've created, the family we want to be, So that's not very eloquent, but or succinct, but that's kind of something I would go down to.
I love it. And I think so often we want to be like, oh, I'm not identified by other thing, but we are. We are identified. Like that makes us who we are. Is that you're a husband, right? Yeah. And you're a father, and and you're a son, and you're a brother.
Yeah. Well, and as you think about that, and it's kind of opposed to the first comment, which was like I like to blaze my own trail. Yeah. But so then I think of where I came from. So we're a country of immigrants, right? So not everybody, most people in America came from other countries. Right. But, I think about my grandparents, for instance, on my mom's side, they're from mainland China, right? And so my grandpa studied at University of Texas. This is in the 50s. Like when my mom, right after my mom was born, he left to go get his master's, living in Taiwan at the time. And this is the 50s. They didn't have FaceTime or they didn't have computers to talk to each other, anything like that. So, I think about his life of leaving his family, go studying, then bringing them over. They, first moved to Peru and then to Brazil and then to the States. And, my mom grew up in Taiwan and other countries until she was like 8 years old. Right. Wow. So it's kind of like, no wonder I have that strain in me to do my own thing. Cause that's what my family has done too. Yeah. Right. So so much of my identity, I think, is wrapped up in things like that you start thinking about it and you go, oh yeah, like it does make sense. It does add up, if you will. Yeah. And,
we blaze our own trail, but we're also a product of the people around us and the family and
of course,
which is, this is really powerful. I really thought you were going to say, well, I grew up in Naperville and I founded this business. So this has been fantastic. Yeah. And you didn't talk about, you talked about being an entrepreneur, but you saved what you do for a living, because that's going to be my second question. So you didn't have to use it in your 3 sentences. So that's very smart. So that's a pretty insider view of John Paul LaShawn, which is great. Yeah. And now I want to say, what do you do? Because we've hinted at the entrepreneur, we've hinted at the pilgrim, and obviously most people listening to this know we're a pilgrimage company and we're doing this podcast. So what do you do for a living? What's your day-to-day look like? We've joked about this before, so you don't have to tell us how boring it is. You can just tell us how exciting it is.
It is very exciting. I love what I do. I love my job. So it's crazy to think about. Verso Ministries was started 7 years ago, which it doesn't seem like that long at all. But so I'm the founder of Verso Ministries. We are a Catholic pilgrimage company. Our whole mission is to facilitate encounters with Jesus on travel, right? And so I get the pleasure of doing that each and every day. I get to direct a team of people who are passionate about that same mission, and we work with a lot of Catholic churches, schools, organizations to help them. Essentially, to me, it's a ministry of evangelization. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That through these encounters to sacred places, we can help people grow closer to God, to learn about one another, to learn about who God is, who they are, who one another is, and help them. We talk about this a lot. We help them navigate the pilgrimage of life, that the smaller pilgrimages that we lead help them reflect on their larger pilgrimage of life.
Yeah. And that's what the podcast is going to be about. And that's what I'm so excited about, that we can see these pilgrimages like, okay, John Paul, you have this company and you set up trips for people, right? And okay, if you had to, if you had to boil it down, you could view your job through that lens. But what I love about Verso is that you don't view your job through that lens. You don't view the company through that lens, but that you view it through the lens you just said, that these pilgrimages are supposed to be, yes, beautiful trips and amazing journeys, and in some ways, great photo album producers, but that ultimately what we learn on that pilgrimage has a greater purpose, that we can take that into our everyday life and say, what did I learn here? And so over the next few episodes, even, we're going to talk to pilgrims who learned really important lessons on their pilgrimage, especially to World Youth Day. That's what we'll be doing the next few episodes, but that they then took it into their everyday life, and what is God saying through the people, through the things we see. And so, you have this pilgrimage company. It was probably crazy to be like, I'm going to quit my job and start this, but you have this vision for something even greater, right? You're not just going to start a travel agent, right? You're going to start this work of evangelization. Where did you get this idea?
Where did I get the idea? So I wonder that often. But no, honestly, it started. So my previous job to working here, I was working in college campus ministry, and I was doing mainly retreats and pilgrimages. That was like my role, was leading trips for students over fall break, winter break, doing retreats over weekends and things, right?
It sounds like a pretty sweet gig.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it. Loved it. I miss working with the college students. But anyways, honestly, it was always a easy water cooler dinner conversation starter, right? Like, people knew I was in this line of work. And so that was always like the default question to me whenever I'd be at like a work lunch with other people from a campus or seeing friends on the weekends or whatever. It was always, the question was always like, where are you going to next? What's your next trip? Because people love talking about travel. They love, you love thinking about it, dreaming about it. And people would always were interested in like, where have you been? Where are you going? So it just was a constant, just like, question I would get, because who doesn't love kind of talking about travel, right?
Yeah. So,
and then in those conversations, it was always kind of a running joke from people, or even myself, I would say, that would be like, man, wouldn't that be fun if you like, that was your job, like full time? Like, if you just traveled and you just, plan trips and traveled all the time, wouldn't that be fun? And I would always be like, oh, haha, funny. How would I ever do that? I mean, it's an important piece of my old job, but it wasn't the full piece, right? There was a lot of other things I was doing.
Sure.
So I could never imagine that it would have been a full-time job. And I never heard or really thought of a pilgrimage company, because I was just planning these trips myself, right?
Sure.
So I was, if we were going to Italy, I was like contacting the hotels and contacting the bus companies, and we would actually never use a bus company. We would just, we would just walk everywhere.
Yeah, college kids will walk.
Yeah. But anyways, I would plan it all myself. So that's also how I learned to plan pilgrimages, because I just did it myself, and then never thought that like I could just be hired by a pilgrimage company out there.
Right.
Okay. Right. But then all of a sudden, certainly the Holy Spirit, but all of a sudden the joke turned from a joke of like, wouldn't that be fun? And it turned more into like, well, why wouldn't I do that? And you could do that full time. It was less a joke and more of like, hey, you should actually think about that. Right. And I remember I was kind of getting a little restless in my job. And I remember just, I'm on these job listing boards and stuff, right? And so I get an email with potential jobs, and I wasn't even really looking for jobs. But I would always like open the email and look to see what's available.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, even though I wasn't looking.
Yeah.
But nothing seemed fulfilling. I'd be like, no, I'm not interested in any of those. But I would just always look at them. And anyways, this is a long answer to your question.
No,
but again, it was that like unexpected switch in my own heart that was like, this, like, well, why not?
Yeah.
And then for a long time, it was like, well, I have a lot of reasons why not. Right? Because it was on my heart for a while. Then it kind of turned into why not? And then it kind of turned into, what if you started your own thing?
Right.
And I started dreaming about that. And then I had all these excuses, like,
definitely,
I don't know how to start a business. Like, it sounds expensive. What if I lose a lot of money? What if I make a fool of myself? What if, God forbid, what if something terrible happens on a pilgrimage?
Yeah.
What if I have to start it and then stop it? And then I look like, just so embarrassed that, like, you failed.
Failure.
Right.
Yeah.
So much of the discernment was just this discernment out of fear of, like, what would happen. For months it was like that.
Yeah. God never wants us to discern out of fear, but it's the, like, MO of most of us, right? Like, we can think of all the bad things and we can think of all the why nots.
Right.
Was there a particular moment when you maybe heard God in a particular way calling you out and to say, you can do this?
Yeah, it was. I'm not like I would call that a burning bush moment,
Sure.
right? I do not feel like I'm a person that would think that those things happen. Like, I know they happen theoretically, but never would imagine it would happen to me. But yeah, the long story short goes that, I was praying about this for several months, thinking about it, talking with people. And then I was leading a pilgrimage to World Youth Day with students. And on every pilgrimage, we ask people to bring a prayer intention, right? Because this is a pilgrimage. You should pray about something. So my prayer intention was basically just, okay, Lord, what should I do? I'm kind of restless. I'm not sure what I should do. I have this on my heart to start my own pilgrimage ministry. No idea what that means. Give me some clarity here. So I remember it so distinctly. It was the first night that the Pope was there. So the Holy Father comes out. It's the first, they call it the welcome of the Pope. Okay. And Pope Francis was giving his speech there. It was just a short 10-minute kind of homily, right? And he was talking about the life of Christians and what it means to follow Jesus. And he was like, literally, I felt like he was talking to me because he was talking about all of these fears to say, like, why don't we follow Jesus? Well, we're scared. We're lazy. We search for meaning in other things, not in our own faith and in God. But then he gave this line about mountain climbers and how people who climb mountains have a saying. And the saying is this, is that the goal of climbing a mountain is not to never fall. It's to not remain fallen. And I remember hearing all this stuff, and he says that line, the goal of climbing a mountain is not to never fall. It's to not remain fallen. And it was literally like a light bulb in my head that was just like, oh, like he's speaking like literally directly to me. The Holy Spirit is speaking directly through Pope Francis to me. It's like I'm the only one in this field that felt like, and that was literally the moment where I was like, okay, yeah, I need to do this. Like everything switched from that moment forward.
That's so good. Oh, like so much could be said about that line too. It's hard for me to ask the next question and not like just talk about that. But I think it's just so powerful that here you're starting this company that is about these encounters, and it came from an encounter, right? It came from a pilgrimage. It came from, so we talk about how pilgrimages are unique times to encounter God, to hear his voice. And sometimes it happens in really obvious ways that we aren't expecting. Like sometimes you're on this pilgrimage and the Lord really speaks. And you talked earlier kind of about like looking back at life and seeing things once you have that reflection. And I had a moment in pilgrimage where I had a question for the Lord. I didn't even know why I was asking it, but I was unsatisfied with doing, like, I wanted to do his work and I wasn't sure I was in the right place. And I was sitting at the Sea of Galilee at the Peter's Primacy. I was all by myself. Entirely by myself, because my whole pilgrimage group, this was my third time there. So my whole pilgrimage group was behind me listening to the guide, but the guide knew this was my favorite place in the Holy Land and I deserved to have my spot. So
Nice.
He was like, go on ahead. You've heard me, you know? So Shafiq makes me go and sit at the Sea of Galilee. And I just asked the Lord, like, I want to feed your sheep. Because this is the place in the Holy Land where the Lord asked Peter to feed his sheep and to tend his sheep. And so I said, Lord, I want to feed your sheep. I just want to make sure I'm doing it correctly. So like, show me. And he didn't speak to me at that moment, right? But I can go back to that moment where that was like this profound time where I was vulnerable enough to say, I want to do this, like, show me the way. And he's shown me in different ways. I quit my job later, and then now I quit my other job and came here. And so just to have that reassurance that he is always going to show us if we ask and be vulnerable.
Right.
But those pilgrimage moments where we just kind of are broken open, I think, and have those encounters, whether he's going to tell us there on the spot, like he did you, whether he's going to tell us later, whether he's going to work through maybe someone we talk to, or so that's what I'm excited about this podcast, is to hear people's stories like that.
Yeah.
And say, how did the Lord work? Because I think it's also very human to say that doesn't happen to me. Like you said yourself.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. For sure.
I don't have these burning bush moments. Well, maybe we just need the eyes to see them, and maybe they happen in different ways than we're expecting.
Right.
We're not going to hear this voice, right?
Yeah.
You may hear it through someone else, like the Pope, or you may hear it through another pilgrim. And I think that's important too.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, the funny part of the story too is that, so I'm going to sound like not obnoxious, but I mean blessed, because so I had been in the presence of the Holy Father several times before this. Okay, so I'm just that spoiled. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah,
spoiled kid. But so I'd been in the presence of the Holy Father many times before, and Pope Francis included. But the funny part about this whole thing was it was always in Rome, and I'm the worst with languages. I don't know anything other than English. Okay, I know a little Chinese from my background, but really, I mean, and Pope Francis doesn't speak Chinese. Fun fact. So I'd always seen him in Rome, and the address is never in a language I could understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but at World Youth Day, they translate over the radio.
Yeah.
Okay, and so then. And of course, I don't come prepared. Like, I'm sure they told me to bring a radio. Of course, I didn't bring a radio. But our guide had a radio, and none of us had radios. But our guide was listening to the radio, and then he was then like he was saying what the translator was saying on the radio, right? So it was like Pope Francis talking, gets translated on the radio through the interpreter, and then our guide was saying it out loud to all of us listening.
I love it.
Right, in English. So this is the first time I'd actually heard the Holy Father speak, and I could understand them.
Wow. Yes.
Right. So if the guide wasn't doing that, then I would have I would have missed the whole message.
You would have like taken a nap or something. Like you
I probably been like, okay, falling asleep. This is cool. But so it was like, again, it was the words of Pope Francis, but working through
this instrument.
Yeah, exactly. All these people.
That's powerful. I was really grateful when we went to World Youth Day a few weeks ago that you did tell us to bring a radio, because I don't think I would have thought of that. And it does make such a difference to actually, I mean, you can go back and read the addresses. And I recommend to all our pilgrims, like, go back again and again and go back to these words, because he said these to you, but it does make such a difference to actually hear, even in maybe kind of the broken English sometimes that you get in the translations. It makes such a difference to be in that moment and to be on that pilgrimage and hear those words.
Right.
So that's fun. But well, in the upcoming episodes, like I mentioned, we do have some pilgrims who are going to share stories of the way that God worked on pilgrimage, even through some surprising means. Maybe they were learning lessons they didn't ask. I think sometimes we get answers that we don't expect to questions we haven't asked. And so I'm excited to talk to them and find out more. But so we're going to wrap up now, but we've tossed this idea around a lot about pilgrimage. And so I'd love in the next episode to really delve into what the heck is a pilgrimage, and why is it any different than like maybe just going to Rome for fun?
Sure.
Or going to Lisbon for fun, right?
For sure.
So thanks for joining us. And we look forward to talking more about this in our next episode. So join us again. God bless.